Jack's private jet sliced through the sky, gliding smoothly above the clouds. He leaned back in his leather seat, sipping on a glass of whiskey as he glanced out the window. Below him, the vast ocean stretched endlessly, glistening under the afternoon sun. He had taken countless flights before. This one felt no different. Then it happened. A sharp jolt rocked the jet. The cabin lights flickered. A warning alarm blared through the cockpit. Jack's heart pounded as he unbuckled his seatbelt and rushed toward the cockpit. "What's going on?" he demanded. The pilot's face was pale, his hands gripping the controls tightly. "Engine failure. We're losing altitude fast." Jack's stomach clenched. "Can you land it?" The pilot didn't answer. The aircraft shook violently as another explosion erupted from the left engine. Flames engulfed the wing, sending thick black smoke trailing into the sky. The plane tilted sharply downward, spiraling toward the ocean below. Jack barely had time to react before the impact. Everything went black. Linda was working in the fields on the outskirts of the village, carefully picking plantains to take to the market. The sun beat down on her, making her forehead glisten with sweat. She paused for a moment, wiping her brow, when a loud boom shattered the stillness of the afternoon. Her head snapped up. Smoke. A thick, dark column of it rose into the sky in the distance. Her heart pounded. Something had crashed. Without hesitation, she dropped her basket of plantains and took off running. Her bare feet pounded against the dirt path as she made her way toward the smoke. The closer she got, the stronger the smell of burning metal and fuel filled the air. When she finally reached the crash site, her breath caught in her throat. Twisted metal was strewn everywhere, parts of the aircraft still ablaze. The heat was unbearable, making the air shimmer. Pieces of luggage and debris were scattered across the ground. She scanned the wreckage, panic setting in. There was no movement, no sound of survivors. Then she saw him, a man, lying motionless on the ground just a few feet away from the wreckage. His clothes were torn, his face smeared with dirt and blood. His chest rose and fell. He was alive. Linda rushed to his side. He was heavy, his body limp. She placed a trembling hand on his forehead. He was burning up. Her mind raced. She had to get him out of here before the flames spread. Summoning all the strength she had, she hooked her arms under his and dragged him away from the wreckage. The journey back to the village felt like forever. Her muscles ached. Her legs shook, but she refused to stop. This man needed help. By the time she reached the village hospital, her body was drenched in sweat, and her breaths came in ragged gasps. The nurses rushed forward, lifting the unconscious man onto a stretcher and wheeling him inside. Linda stood there, her chest heaving, watching as the doors swung shut behind them. Who was he? And why was he the only one who survived? She didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. His fate had somehow become tied to hers. Jack woke up days later, his eyelids heavy as he struggled to open them. His head throbbed with a dull, relentless pain, and every muscle in his body ached as if he had been hit by a truck. The bright light above him was blinding, making him squint. A faint beeping sound echoed in the quiet room. Slowly, his senses adjusted. He was in a hospital. Panic surged through him. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his ribs, forcing him back down with a groan. His breathing quickened. Where was he? How did he get here? His mind felt like a vast, empty space, void of any memories. A doctor entered the room, his expression calm and reassuring. "You're awake," he said, stepping closer. "How do you feel?" Jack swallowed, his throat dry. "Like I got hit by a train," he muttered, his voice hoarse. The doctor gave a small smile. "You survived a plane crash. You're lucky to be alive." Jack blinked, the words not fully registering. A plane crash? He searched his mind, desperate to remember something. Anything, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. The memories weren't there. I don't remember," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctor's smile faded. "That's not uncommon after a traumatic event. Memory loss can be temporary, but we'll need to monitor you." Jack's heart pounded in his chest. Who was he? Where was he from? He closed his eyes, trying to force a memory, but all he found was darkness. A soft voice broke through his panic. "You're safe now." He turned his head and saw a young woman sitting by his bedside. She had warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. Her clothes were simple, her hands rough, but there was kindness in her expression. He didn't know her, but something about her presence was comforting. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaky. "My name is Linda," she said. "I found you after the crash." Jack tried to process her words. The stranger had saved him. He studied her face, hoping for a flicker of recognition, but nothing came. Linda placed a small wrapped bundle on the table beside him. "I brought you food." His stomach growled in response. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until now. Linda unwrapped a small portion of roasted plantains and handed him a piece. He took it hesitantly, chewing slowly. It was warm and slightly sweet, the taste unfamiliar yet oddly comforting. "I've been coming every day," Linda said. "The doctor said you would wake up soon, so I waited." Jack looked at her, trying to understand why she had done this. "Why?" Linda smiled, a little shyly. "Because you had no one else." The weight of her words settled over him. He didn't know who he was, but one thing was clear. Linda was his only friend. She had paid for his treatment, brought him food, and sat by his side while he was unconscious. She had nothing, yet she gave him everything she could. Jack felt a strange sense of gratitude, even though he was still lost in a world without memories. For now, he had one thing to hold on to: Linda. The day had finally come. Linda sat in the small hospital room, listening to the doctor as he gave her the news she had been waiting for. "He doesn't need to stay here anymore. He's fine." Relief washed over her, but at the same time, uncertainty settled in. Jack still had no memories, no past to return to. He had nowhere to go. But as she looked at him, sitting up in bed, his face still holding a hint of confusion, she knew what she had to do. She turned to the doctor and nodded. "I'll take him home with me." Jack blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" Linda gave him a small smile. "Of course. I won't leave you alone." Jack wasn't sure what to say. He had woken up in this hospital with no recollection of who he was, no idea why he had survived when no one else had. The only thing he knew was that Linda had been by his side every day. She had brought him food, paid for his treatment, and now she was offering him a place to stay. He didn't have a better option, so he accepted. The journey back to Linda's home was quiet. Jack looked around as they walked through the village. The streets were narrow and dusty, lined with wooden stalls where vendors sold fresh fruits, woven baskets, and handmade crafts. Children ran barefoot through the paths, their laughter ringing through the air. The people they passed smiled and waved at Linda, and she greeted each of them warmly. Jack noticed the respect in their eyes when they looked at her. She was well loved here. When they finally reached her house, Jack took in his new home. It was small, old, and barely standing. The walls were made of wood and patched with whatever material she could find. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, and the single window had a long crack running through it. But inside it was warm and cozy. A thin mattress was placed in one corner, and a small wooden table sat in the middle of the room with two mismatched chairs. A few clay pots lined a shelf, holding what little food she had. "It's not much," Linda said hesitantly, "but it's home." Jack took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "It's perfect." Linda smiled, relieved that he wasn't uncomfortable with her living situation. She handed him a rolled-up blanket and gestured to the corner. "You can sleep there." That night, they ate a simple meal of roasted plantains and a small serving of stew. Jack had never tasted anything like it before, or maybe he had, but he couldn't remember. Either way, it was delicious. As they sat in the dim candlelight, the weight of his lost memories pressed on him. But for the first time since waking up, he didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, Linda woke Jack before sunrise. "Come with me," she said. They walked to the market, where vendors were already setting up their stalls, calling out prices and arranging fruits and vegetables in neat piles. The air buzzed with conversation, and the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. "This is how I make a living," Linda explained, setting down a basket of plantains. "I sell these at the market every day." Jack nodded, watching as she arranged the plantains neatly. He still felt lost, but at least he could help. "How can I help?" She smiled. "Just watch and learn." Jack stood beside her as she started calling out to potential customers. At first, he simply handed her plantains and counted the coins. But as the morning went on, he found himself interacting with the buyers. He cracked a few jokes, making people laugh, and to his surprise, more and more people started coming to their stall. Linda watched in awe as Jack charmed the customers. He had a natural way of drawing people in. Soon, they had sold out of plantains, faster than Linda ever had before. She looked at the empty basket, then at Jack. "That's never happened before." Jack grinned. "Maybe I was a salesman before the crash." Linda chuckled. "Or maybe you're just special." That night, they sat outside under the stars, counting the coins they had made. The night air was cool, and the sound of crickets filled the silence between them. Linda nudged Jack. "You're good at this." Jack laughed. "Maybe this is my calling." Linda smiled, but deep down, she knew Jack was different. There was something about the way he moved, the way he spoke to people, the way he had handled himself at the market. He wasn't just some ordinary man. And the fact that he had survived a plane crash with no memory only made the mystery of his identity even deeper. Jack, too, was starting to feel it. A nagging feeling that there was more to him than what he could remember. But for now, he pushed the thought aside. He had a new life here with Linda, and that was enough. At least for now. The market had been good to them that day. Linda's stall had sold out of plantains faster than usual, thanks to Jack's effortless way of drawing in customers. He had a charm about him that made people laugh, and laughter led to more sales. By the end of the day, their baskets were empty, and Linda's pockets were fuller than usual. As they walked home under the setting sun, the air was cool, and a soft breeze rustled through the trees. The village was quiet, the sounds of the market long behind them. Jack and Linda chatted about the events of the day, laughing about the elderly woman who had haggled over the price of plantains, only to buy twice as many as she had planned. But then, something shifted. Jack noticed it first. The street they walked was nearly deserted, and the only sound was the rhythmic crunch of their footsteps against the dirt path. Yet, there was something else, another set of footsteps just slightly out of sync with their own. Jack slowed his pace slightly, his body tensing. He glanced over at Linda, who was still talking, unaware. He gently touched her arm, signaling for her to stop. "Stay close," he whispered, his voice calm but firm. Linda frowned. "What is it?" Jack didn't answer. Instead, he subtly turned his head, catching sight of a dark figure trailing behind them. The person was keeping their distance, but their movements were deliberate, calculated. The road ahead was isolated, leading into a patch of thick trees. There were no houses nearby, no one to call for help if things went wrong. Then, in an instant, the figure closed the distance. A man stepped out of the shadows, his face partially covered by a scarf. A glint of metal caught the dim light. A knife. "Give me everything," the man barked, his voice rough and desperate. His eyes darted between Jack and Linda, his grip on the knife tight. Linda gasped, instinctively stepping closer to Jack. Her heart pounded. This had never happened to her before. Jack, however, didn't flinch. Something inside him reacted instinctively. Without a second thought, his body moved before his mind could catch up. In a blur, Jack lunged forward. His hand shot out, grabbing the attacker's wrist and twisting it with precise force. The man yelped in pain, the knife clattering to the ground. In the same movement, Jack swept his leg forward, knocking the thief off balance. The man stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. Jack didn't say a word. He just stared at the man, something fierce and unreadable in his expression. The attacker scrambled to his feet, his courage completely shattered. He turned and ran into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Silence settled between Jack and Linda. The only sound was Linda's heavy breathing as she tried to process what had just happened. Her eyes locked onto Jack. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers as if seeing them for the first time. The way he had moved, it had been too smooth, too precise. He had acted without thinking, as if trained for moments like this. And that terrified him. "I don't know," he admitted. Linda took a step closer, watching him carefully. "That wasn't normal, Jack. The way you moved, the way you handled him. You've done this before." Jack swallowed hard. A chill ran through him. He had no memory of his past, but his body remembered. That meant something. But what? Weeks passed, and Jack and Linda became inseparable. They spent their days working at the market, selling plantains, and their evenings sitting outside her small house, talking for hours under the stars. It became their routine. They laughed, shared stories, and made fun of the funny things that happened in the marketplace. The overenthusiastic haggler, the nosy old woman who always seemed to know everyone's business, and the children who would sneak up and try to grab a fruit when Linda wasn't looking. Jack found joy in the simplicity of it all. It was a life he didn't remember ever having, but he loved it nonetheless. Though Jack had no memory of his past, he didn't feel lost anymore. Life with Linda felt right. Yet, beneath the peaceful days and laughter-filled nights, there was always an unspoken question lingering in both of their minds. Who was Jack? Every morning, after breakfast, Jack and Linda would walk to the village police station. They went in hopes of finding news about his past, perhaps a missing persons report, a family looking for him, or an update about the plane crash. But each day they left with the same answer: nothing. No one had come looking for him. No new information had surfaced about the wreckage. It was as if Jack never existed before the crash. It was strange. Too strange. Linda knew it, and she could tell Jack felt it too, even if he never said it aloud. One evening, as they sat outside counting the money from the day's market sales, Jack spoke up. "Do you ever wonder why no one's looking for me?" Linda looked at him, her expression soft. "Every day," Jack sighed. "I thought maybe a family member, a friend, someone, but it's been weeks. If I had a life before this, why does it feel like it doesn't exist anymore?" Linda didn't have an answer, but she reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "One day the answers will come. Until then, you have me." Jack smiled at her, a warmth settling in his chest. He didn't know why, but that was enough for now. One morning, just like any other, they were on their way to the market. The sun was bright, and the streets were already buzzing with early morning activity. Jack carried a large basket of plantains over his shoulder while Linda walked beside him, humming softly. Then, out of nowhere, the sound of a car engine roared behind them. It was coming too fast. Jack barely had time to react before the vehicle skidded towards them. Linda shouted his name, but he couldn't move in time. Everything went black. When Jack opened his eyes, the world was blurry. His head throbbed, and his body felt like it had been crushed under a heavy weight. He blinked, trying to focus. The first thing he saw was Linda leaning over him, her eyes filled with worry. "Jack!" she gasped, relief flooding her voice. He groaned, trying to sit up, but pain shot through his body. "What happened?" "You were hit by a car," Linda said, helping him sit upright. "You blacked out. We're at the hospital now." Jack pressed a hand to his forehead, his mind spinning. Then, a rush of images flooded his thoughts. Things he didn't recognize, yet somehow felt familiar. A city skyline, a towering office building, a name: Tina. His breath caught in his throat. His memory was coming back. He turned to Linda, his voice shaking. I remember something." Linda's heart pounded. She had always known this moment would come. "What do you remember?" Jack swallowed hard, his eyes distant. "My company. My life before the crash. And Tina, my fiancée." Linda felt a sharp pang in her chest, but she forced a small smile. "That's good, Jack. That's really good." But deep down, she knew. Their time together was about to change forever. Jack called his father that evening. His voice steady, but his emotions conflicted. He had finally regained his memory. He was Jack Thornton, the CEO of a successful company, heir to a powerful family, and a man who had everything before the crash. But as he spoke with his father, he realized that none of that mattered as much as it once had. The next morning, A private jet landed in the village's small airstrip. Jack and Linda boarded, leaving behind the simple life they had shared for the past few months. As the plane took off, Linda looked down at the only home she had ever known. Her heart was heavy with uncertainty. She was stepping into Jack's world now, a world that felt too big, too unfamiliar. But Jack had made a promise. He would not abandon her. She had saved him, and now he would take care of her. When they arrived at the city, a luxury car was already waiting for them. Linda stared at the towering skyline, overwhelmed by the sheer size and speed of everything. The streets were nothing like the dirt paths of her village. The people moved fast, dressed in fine suits and designer clothes. Everything sparkled with wealth and power. Jack reached for her hand, sensing her hesitation. "You'll be safe here, Linda. You don't have to worry about anything." She nodded, though her heart still pounded in her chest. When they arrived at Jack's mansion, Linda was stunned. The house, or rather the estate, was enormous, with marble floors, grand chandeliers, and servants moving about swiftly. She felt out of place, but Jack never let go of her hand. "I want you to stay here with me," he told her. "This is your home now." Linda looked at him, unsure. "Jack, are you sure? I don't belong here." Jack smiled softly. "You belong with me." The next day, Jack returned to his office. The familiar scent of leather and polished wood greeted him as he stepped into his grand office. His employees and colleagues welcomed him back warmly, but the one person who stood out was his business partner, Tony. Tony rushed forward with an exaggerated grin, embracing Jack as if nothing had ever happened. "Jack, my man, you have no idea how relieved I am to see you alive." Jack studied him carefully. Something felt off. He didn't know what it was, but the embrace, the concern, it felt forced. "Thanks, Tony," Jack said coolly. "It's good to be back." Tony clapped him on the back. "Let's celebrate soon. Drinks on me." Jack nodded but said nothing. The unease in his gut wouldn't go away. That evening, just as he was settling into his study at the mansion, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on his screen. "Meet me at Golden Lounge. It's about your crash." Jack's heart pounded. His first instinct was to ignore it. It could be a prank or worse, a trap. But something inside him told him to go. If there was even a chance of getting answers, he had to take it. He told Linda he had some business to take care of and left without his driver. If this was a setup, he didn't want anyone else getting involved. Golden Lounge was a high-end bar on the outskirts of the city, known for its exclusivity. Jack arrived at the dimly lit establishment and scanned the room. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just wealthy patrons sipping expensive whiskey. Then, a man in a dark jacket sitting at a secluded booth raised his hand slightly, signaling Jack over. Jack approached cautiously and sat across from the man, who looked nervous, his fingers tapping anxiously on the table. "You're Jack Thornton," the man said. It wasn't a question. Jack narrowed his eyes. "And who are you?" The man leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I was the engineer who worked on your jet." Jack felt a cold chill run through him. "What are you talking about?" The man exhaled shakily. I was paid to tamper with it." Jack's stomach tightened. "By who?" The man swallowed hard. "Tony." For a moment, Jack thought he had misheard. "Tony? His best friend? His business partner?" The man continued, his voice filled with guilt. "Tony paid me to sabotage the engine. I was supposed to make it look like a malfunction, like an accident. But I swear, I didn't know it would crash that badly. When I heard you survived, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." Jack's hands clenched into fists under the table. "Why?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The engineer shook his head. "I don't know all the details, but Tony wanted you gone. He even bribed the police to stop looking for you after the crash." Jack's heart pounded in his ears. His mind raced through every interaction he had ever had with Tony. The years of partnership, the trust, the friendship, it had all been a lie. Jack stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The engineer flinched, but Jack didn't spare him another glance. He left the lounge in silence, his blood boiling, his mind spinning. Tony, his best friend, had tried to kill him. Jack got into his car and gripped the steering wheel tightly. He had survived the crash once. He wouldn't let Tony get away with this. It was time to fight back. The next morning, Jack sat in his office, staring out the window. His mind was clouded with thoughts about Tony's betrayal. But there was something else gnawing at him, Tina, his fiancée. She had been the love of his life before the crash. Surely, she had been devastated when he disappeared. Surely, she had searched for him. But since his return, she hadn't called. She hadn't shown up at his home. Not even a message. A deep unease settled in his chest. He needed to see her. Without thinking twice, he grabbed his car keys and drove to her house. The closer he got, the more his anxiety grew. What if she thought he was dead? What if she had mourned him and moved on? But something in his gut told him it wasn't that simple. He pulled up to her driveway, staring at the sleek, expensive car parked outside. It wasn't hers. He frowned, gripping the spare key he still had to her house. Jack pushed the door open and stepped inside. The scent of her perfume lingered in the air. Everything looked the same. The polished floors, the luxurious furniture, the framed photos of them together still hanging on the walls. But as he moved through the house, a sound made him stop. Laughter. It was coming from upstairs. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. He reached the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. He could hear voices now. Tina's soft giggle and a man's deep chuckle. A sickening feeling twisted in his stomach. He already knew, but he had to see it with his own eyes. He pushed the door open. Tina was lying in bed, wrapped in silk sheets, her golden hair spread across the pillow. Beside her, Tony. Jack stood there, frozen, as they turned to look at him. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then Tina's face went pale. "Jack?" she started, pulling the sheets up around her, her voice laced with panic. Jack didn't say a word. Tony sat up, completely unbothered. He smirked. "Well, I guess the dead do come back to life." Jack's jaw clenched, but he refused to give them the reaction they wanted. He didn't need to scream. He didn't need to fight. He had already won. Without a single word, he turned around and walked out. Jack drove in silence, his grip tight on the steering wheel. His entire world had shattered in just 24 hours. First, Tony's betrayal. Now Tina's. The two people he had trusted the most had conspired against him in ways he never imagined. But if Tony thought he would get away with it, he was wrong. Jack needed proof, concrete evidence that would destroy Tony once and for all. That night, he contacted a private investigator, a man known for uncovering even the deepest secrets. Within days, the investigator returned with files, recordings, and bank transactions. It was worse than Jack had thought. Tony hadn't just tried to kill him. He had paid media outlets and the police to cover up the crash, ensuring that no one searched for Jack after the incident. The moment Jack had disappeared, Tony had started taking control of the company, inching closer to taking everything Jack had built. Jack clenched his fists. Enough was enough. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Detective Harris? I have a case for you." The next morning, Jack stood in his office, watching through the window as police cars pulled up outside. Within minutes, Tony was dragged out of the building in handcuffs. His smug grin was gone, replaced by pure rage. "You think this is over?" Tony yelled as the officers pushed him into the car. "This isn't over, Jack." Jack didn't flinch. He watched as the car doors slammed shut and Tony was driven away. It was over for Tony. But for Jack, it was only the beginning of something new. That night, Jack sat alone in his massive mansion. Yet he had never felt so empty. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on him. Tony's betrayal, Tina's infidelity, the realization that his life before the crash had been built on lies. The silence of the house was deafening. The grand chandelier above him cast a dim glow over the polished floors. The marble countertops, the expensive furniture, the priceless paintings on the walls. None of it mattered. He had everything, yet it all felt meaningless. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring into space. His mind replayed every moment of the past few weeks. Linda carrying him to the hospital, sitting by his bed every day, feeding him, making sure he was okay when no one else even knew he was missing. She had nothing, yet she gave him everything. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. He turned his head slightly as Linda stepped inside. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him, reading the pain on his face. Without hesitation, she walked over and sat beside him on the couch. "You don't have to talk," she said gently. "But I'm here." Jack let out a slow breath, his body relaxing slightly at her words. He turned to look at her, and for the first time that day he felt a sense of peace. "Linda," he started, then hesitated. He didn't even know what to say. How could he explain everything he was feeling? How could he put into words the storm inside him? Linda didn't push him. She simply waited, giving him the space to gather his thoughts. After a long pause, Jack finally spoke. "I spent so much time trying to remember who I was. And now that I do, I don't think I like the person I used to be." Linda tilted her head. "Why?" Jack let out a humorless chuckle. "Because I had all this," he gestured to the mansion around him, "and I didn't see what really mattered. I surrounded myself with people who only cared about money and power. And when I was gone, none of them came looking for me." Linda nodded, understanding his pain. "Maybe that was meant to happen." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" She gave him a soft smile. "Maybe you needed to lose everything to find out what really matters." Jack stared at her, her words settling deep inside him. She was right. The crash hadn't just taken his memory, it had given him a second chance. A chance to rebuild, to choose a different path. And through all of it, Linda had been there. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. "Linda, you saved me." She squeezed his hand lightly. "And you saved me too." Jack's heart swelled. He wasn't lost anymore. He had everything he needed right here beside him. One bright morning, Jack surprised Linda with a boat cruise. He told her nothing about where they were going, only that she should trust him. Linda was hesitant at first. Her entire life had been in the village, and even after moving to the city with Jack, she still wasn't used to grand surprises. But something about the way he looked at her, the way he held her hand as they boarded the boat, told her this was special. The sea stretched out before them, endless and shimmering under the sun. The gentle rocking of the boat, the cool ocean breeze in her hair. It was unlike anything Linda had ever experienced. She glanced at Jack, who was standing beside her at the railing, his eyes focused on the horizon, as if deep in thought. "Jack?" she said softly. He turned to her and smiled. "We're almost there." An hour later, the boat docked at a small island, untouched and breathtaking. Palm trees lined the shore, and soft white sand stretched as far as the eye could see. The sky was painted with the warm hues of the setting sun, casting a golden glow over everything. Linda stepped onto the sand, mesmerized. "Jack, this place, it's beautiful." Jack took her hand and led her down the shoreline, their footprints the only marks on the untouched sand. They walked in comfortable silence, listening to the waves roll in and out, breathing in the fresh sea air. Then Jack suddenly stopped. Linda turned to him, her heart pounding as she saw the seriousness in his eyes. "Jack." He took both of her hands in his grip warm and steady. "Linda," he said, his voice low but certain. "I know what I want." Linda swallowed hard. "What?" Jack cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing against her cheeks. "You." Tears welled in Linda's eyes. For months, they had built something special, something neither of them had planned, but both had come to cherish. Jack had found his way back to his life, but he had also found something far more important along the way. She barely had time to respond before Jack leaned in and kissed her. It was slow and deep, filled with all the words he hadn't said, all the emotions he had held inside. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. A few months later, Jack and Linda stood at the altar. The wedding was a grand affair. The city's elite gathered in the massive hall, the chandeliers casting a golden glow over the luxurious decorations. It was the kind of wedding fit for royalty, but amidst all the glamour, Linda only saw one thing, Jack. As she walked down the aisle, her heart pounded, but not with nerves. It was pure excitement, pure certainty. Jack stood at the end, dressed in an elegant black tuxedo, watching her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. When she reached him, he took her hands, his grip firm, steady. The officiant spoke, but Linda barely heard the words. Her entire focus was on the man standing before her. "Do you, Jack Thornton, take Linda to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Jack's voice was strong, unwavering. "I do." The officiant turned to her. "And do you, Linda, take Jack to be your lawfully wedded husband?" A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling. "I do." They exchanged rings, and when the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, Jack didn't hesitate. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply as the guests erupted in cheers and applause.